Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Lockwood. I'm the Director of NEHS and ELA, and it's a great pleasure, as always, to welcome ELA, NEHS, Sigma Kappa Delta, and Sigma Tau Delta student members and their chapter advisors to this very special webinar, this time with Aneesa Marufu, author of The Balloon Thief, which is the ELA Honor Society's 2025 Big Read text, and winner of the Kimberley Chambers Kickstart Prize for Underrepresented Writers. A little bit of quick housekeeping for you to increase your viewing pleasure. If it could be increased any further, you can click on the full screen button on the top right corner of your screen. And if you want to react to this evening's interview, you can do that using the emoji icons down at the bottom. Before the webinar begins, I want to say a big thank you to Ned Kent, Katie Merton, Jessica McCall, who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure that this webinar is going to be a great success. So thank you all so much. Tonight's interviewer is Elizabeth McLaughlin from Elizabeth in New Jersey. She is a veteran middle school ELA teacher and an ELA Honor Society chapter advisor. As well as being an avid reader herself, she works very hard to share and promote her love of reading with her students by bringing new ELA books into her classroom. Elizabeth has been her school's avid teacher for the past 12 years, a role in which she promotes the importance of higher education and empowers middle school students to strive for academic excellence. She's also the teacher in charge of her school's yearbook, student council, buddy program, and peer mediation program. So she is a busy person. So thank you so much, Elizabeth, for volunteering to lead this webinar. So without further ado, Naaman's going to perform some technological wizardry and connect us all with Elizabeth in New Jersey and Aneesa Marufu in England. Enjoy.
Thanks, Chris. Hello and good evening. I'm very excited to be interviewing Aneesa Marufu tonight. Aneesa, who lives in Manchester, UK, was awarded the Kimberley Chambers Kickstart Prize in 2019, a recognition aimed at uplifting voices from underrepresented backgrounds. Her debut novel, The Balloon Thief, which was published as Rebel of Fire and Flight in the US, weaves together elements of her South Asian heritage with her deep fascination for hot air balloons, creating a vibrant story set in an enchanting, high-flying world, even though Aneesa has yet to take to the skies in one herself. Beyond her writing, Aneesa is an avid reader, always on the hunt for captivating fantasy novels that offer an escape from reality. At home, she balances her imagination with everyday adventures, keeping pace with her two energetic children, who are never far from her side. Welcome, Aneesa.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm so excited for this. The following questions have been submitted by students across the US and around the world. We've tried to include as many of these questions as possible, so let's just get right to it. Okay, our first question is from Jessica Strouder in New Jersey and Sophia Edmondson in Texas. And they want to know who inspired you to start writing, and has that inspiration stayed with you?
I guess I really started writing, like I was very interested in books as a child. I think the inspiration began in school, really. My school was I was very lucky that we had a lot of like author visits. We had a lot of authors who would come in, do assemblies, they'd bring their books, they'd do little workshops with us. I think two authors that really stand out to me, that they're UK-based authors. They're Mallory Blackman and Michael Morpur, and they both won the Children's Laureate at various points throughout my childhood. And I think it was just very exciting to see these big authors come into school. And, you know, at that age, you think they're almost like celebrities, and you're like, wow, their name is on a book, and, you know, they're kind of there talking about their writing, and, you know, we're doing all these like exciting things. And I think that's really when I kind of got inspired to start writing myself, was kind of seeing these like celebrity authors and thinking, oh, that's something I could do, I suppose.
Wonderful. That is exciting. I wish we had that here. Our second question is from Kathleen De Silva in New Hampshire, and she wants to know, what kind of books do you read? Who is your favorite author, and have they inspired you?
Oh, it's hard to pick one. I would say I think I've always enjoyed YA. You know, even today as an adult, I still very much love reading YA. Fantasy has always been my kind of go-to genre, so anything with dragons, witches, ghosts, you know. I would say maybe like the Aragon books. They had left a big impression on me. Hunger Games, anything by Holly Black. I love her. I love her new YA series, the Cruel Prince books. But I also loved her Spiderwick Chronicles, which was like the middle grade book I grew up reading. So can't pick one. I'll give you maybe three, but anything kind of mythological retellings, Greek mythology, you know, Percy Jackson, those kind of books, I'd say are probably my favorite authors.
Great. Okay. Avery Girasol from Massachusetts wants to know, what was the moment at which you considered yourself a writer?
I guess I've always enjoyed writing. I think I maybe pursued it a bit more seriously when I was a teenager. I attempted to write my own novel, but it kind of just fizzled out into nothing. Then I took kind of massive gaps from writing. School, I kind of fell into different jobs. It's only maybe when I was in my final year of university, so I was 21, and that's kind of when I started to pursue it a bit more seriously. I guess the kind of very intense workload of studying a business degree, I kind of needed some like creative outlet on the side. So I suppose that's when I kind of started actively writing with the intention of actually publishing. But I think even then, I didn't really consider myself a writer. It wasn't really like something it wasn't a career at that point. It was just something I was actively trying to pursue. I think maybe when I won Kimberley Chambers Prize, that was then a turning point. That was when it was like, oh, this could actually become something. This could actually become a job. And I guess that's probably when I first thought maybe I actually am a writer. I can actually have that title, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Great. Um, Lily McCann in Massachusetts wants to know, in general, is there a specific genre that you prefer writing in, or is it more that you prefer writing when inspiration strikes?
I would say fantasy has always been what I've lent towards. But I'm still quite open to exploring other genres. At the minute, I'm actually kind of dabbling in free historical romances that I'm just jumping between at the minute. I think Bridgerton has kind of been my go-to for these like inspiration for these novels. But I still quite like murder mysteries. I love reading like thrillers and anything, I suppose, that isn't contemporary, I think is my least favorite genre. For me, reading has always been the kind of escapist factor. I want to feel as disconnected from reality as possible. So I say I would be open to writing any genre but contemporary. For me, it's just too close to home. I don't want to read about characters going to work and going to school because it's just too boring.
Right.
I don't want to read that.
Right. We live that day to day. I get that. Okay, next question from Nora Murphy in Massachusetts and Rebecca Goetz in California. And they want to know, where do you prefer to write? And what does your writing process usually look like?
I mean, I don't have like specific writing nook or anything. I just write on my laptop on the sofa, basically. It's not really anything fancy, but it kind of gets done. I don't really have as much of a process as I used to. I think I used to be in the routine of like getting up every morning, doing a bit of writing, then doing some other work, but work and children have kind of got in the way of that. So I would say Sunday mornings is my dedicated writing time. I'll usually do maybe like 2 or 3 hours of just kind of uninterrupted writing. throughout the week, it's very sporadic. It's just kind of whenever I can. It might be in the evening, might be a little bit here and there between other tasks. It depends what stage I am in the writing process, I think. For me, drafting has always been the hardest part. So that's where I'm kind of writing the story for the first time. I'm writing out that first draft. So I can never really sit and do that for more than 2 hours max, because it just kind of, I feel very creatively burnt out by doing that. Whereas if I'm editing, if I'm kind of proofreading or going through and editing scenes, that's a lot easier for me. I can do that for 4 or 5 hours quite happily. I could spend a whole day editing. So it depends what I'm doing. It depends if I have a deadline. You know, it's not unheard of for me to, like, the weekend before a deadline, I will just power write for like 10 hours. So there's no real process. It's just, it's a little bit all over the place.
Great. Jacqueline Deshand from Indiana, sorry, wants to know, how did you come up with the idea for the balloon thief?
Yes, at the time I was reading a lot of like diverse fantasy. So Children of Blood and Bone, We Hunt the Flame, Girls of Paper and Fire, you know, all these like really high concept fantasy worlds, but they're based on you know, different cultures and different traditions. And I just really liked that kind of aspect of fantasy, because I didn't really get fantasy books like that back when I was a teenager. It was very much your stereotypical dragons, medieval fantasy, you know, that kind of Tolkien, Game of Thrones, where it's all very set in like a medieval Europe kind of setting. So these books were very interesting. I was like, wow, you've got fantasy books and they're set in the desert, or they're set in the jungle. They're inspired by all these kind of different cultures and different gods and different types of magic. So that was a big inspiration for me. I kind of liked the idea of a South Asian inspired fantasy. And then it was a pandemic book. I wrote this kind of in 2019, 2020, you know, to the pandemic. So it was a very much an escapist factor for me. You know, I kind of wanted my characters to go on this big epic adventure because I was stuck at home and very bored. So that's kind of where the balloons came into it, that whole idea that you're just kind of, you want to escape and the only way is up. You know, the only way to escape is to literally float away. And that's kind of where I just kind of got a bit obsessed with the idea of flight and my characters having an adventure in the sky. And then I would say it's also kind of the racism element came into it. I like the idea of exploring everyday issues, but in a fantasy world. Sometimes it makes it a little bit easier when you're not talking about any specific real world group of people. You've kind of made up your own races and your own racial tensions. It's almost like you can explore that a little bit easier than if it was like a contemporary setting. So that's something I wanted to kind of discuss in YA as well.
Great. Can I ask, do you have plans to go in a hot air balloon anytime soon?
I would like to, but I've heard that it's not as easy as just booking it. You have to like kind of look at the weather forecasts, and a lot of the times it can get cancelled last minute if it's too windy. So I need to kind of set aside like a good week in the summer when it's like really good weather, and then arrange something. But I've definitely been to festivals where I've seen them take off. I've seen them like being inflated and taken off, and that's really exciting. So hopefully one day it'll happen.
Great. Okay, Samantha Moreno from New Jersey. She wants to know, who do you write for? Do you write for your characters or for a real person?
I suppose I write for myself. That sounds a little selfish. Writing for me it's a very calming process. You know, I almost kind of consider it as the same as like exercising or drinking enough water in the day. Like it's almost become a part of my mental health, you know, like it's essential to me just being happy and being content. And for me it's just a way of relaxing. You know, if I go too long without writing, I get really like frustrated and really like snappy, and it's almost like I need the outlet. I need the creative outlet. I need to burn off that creative energy. So it's about keeping me healthy and happy first and foremost. And I feel like a lot of people who are also very creative people who enjoy reading, enjoy writing will feel similar. If they go a stretch of time without doing that, they feel it in themselves that something's wrong. They need to kind of get energy out. So I suppose that's the real reason that I write.
Great. I love that. I don't think that's selfish. Okay, our next question is from Tyler Redman in Maryland, and they want to know, do you ever get writer's block? And if you do, how do you get around it? How do you deal with it?
I guess what I really do is I jump between projects. So I also freelance as well on the side as writing. So I write the scripts basically for mobile game apps. So script writing is very different from novel writing, and I find it helps to have different types of writing. So if I'm kind of, in the middle of a novel and I'm stuck on a scene, or I just kind of can't get it to gel, I'll be like, right, I'll jump and I'll do some script writing, and that is just line by line dialogue, and that's a lot easier. And then if I get bored of that, I'll jump to another task. And I also freelance. I write like English comprehension questions for a distance learning provider. So that's very factual type of writing. So because I've kind of got three very different types of writing, I just kind of jump between. And when one is getting a little bit running out of steam, I'll just jump to the other. And it sounds a little bit chaotic and disorganized, but eventually everything get done. Maybe not that fast, I don't know, but it gets done.
Okay. Our next question is from Sue Baldwin in New York, and they would like to know, what do you do to keep yourself going during the writing process? How do you stay motivated?
For me, writing is very visual. I like to really imagine the scenes and the characters. So for me, I like to create like little mood boards or Pinterest boards, kind of, this is the celebrity who would play my character if this was made into a big Netflix movie. And this is like the playlist I would have on Spotify. And, I like to collect lots of little pictures. And I think sometimes seeing it and looking at it or listening to it, it almost, it breathes life into your story. It kind of brings it to life. You can visualize it a bit more. I like to reenact scenes in my head, and I'm one of those weirdos who says my dialogue whilst I'm writing it, kind of thing. So that all keeps me motivated. I think sometimes if it's just words on a screen, it almost doesn't feel real, and you just feel a bit like, why am I doing this? It's not that good, or it's not real enough. So it's kind of like it's making it real for you, and that is the motivating factor, I suppose.
I love that. Great. Pinterest boards. Yeah. Cute.
To have a Pinterest board. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I have a bunch myself. I wish that they were around when I had children. I would have planned my whole room based on the Pinterest boards.
Just perfect Pinterest bedrooms. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, our next question is from Navira Mahid in Texas, and they want to know, as a South Asian woman herself, she's curious to hear about how your heritage impacts your writing decisions. What have you taken from your life experiences or cultural knowledge to add to your work?
So with The Balloon Thief, a lot of it was the world building. I'd say I took this inspiration. The food, the clothing, the environment, the climate. I wanted to kind of take lots of little influences and just kind of create my own world that was a bit different to other fantasy books I was seeing. But I did also want to kind of tackle like Islamophobia and kind of racism, extremism, those type of a bit more serious themes. I guess kind of growing up in the UK, growing up British Pakistani, these were issues that I faced as a teenager, and they're not really issues that are explored as much in fiction. I guess it's a difficult topic to explore, which is maybe why I chose fantasy rather than more of a contemporary setting. I just like the idea of like two different people from two entirely different worlds kind of coming together and putting their differences aside. I liked the idea that, intolerances can be overcome by education, by learning, asking questions, getting to know people. I think that is kind of what is going to help these issues going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. For the next generation. Okay, our next question is from Ethan Krieger in New York. And they want to know, what do you feel were the works that inspired you the most leading up to the creation of The Balloon Thief?
I would say a lot of like diverse fantasy books, City Brass, We Hunt the Flame, but also Mallory Blackman's Noughts and Crosses. So that might not be as well known in the American market, but in the UK they've made like a series and it's very popular. And I liked the idea of the kind of the two different characters and overcoming their kind of prejudice and going against society norms and kind of having their own adventures and their own friendships. I really like that idea, and I kind of wanted to replicate that in The Balloon Thief and have a bit of a found family where you've got two characters who would not normally get along, but they're almost kind of thrown into a situation where they're forced to get along. I kind of really wanted to explore that.
Great. Okay. Our next question is from Allison Marietta in Pennsylvania, and she wants to know, can you share some insights into your editing process? Do you enjoy it or is it difficult for you?
I mean, for me, I've always enjoyed editing more than the drafting, the actual writing. For me, it's just the first drafts are always awful, you know, that they'll feel very rushed. They'll feel very like a bit basic, like this happened, then that happened, then move on to the next scene. Then he said this, she said that. You know, it's kind of me literally just getting the story out, getting the words on the page, and then I'll fix it later and I'll make it sound nice in editing. So I'll always finish the first draft and feel this doesn't sound very good, or it's too short, or there's some scenes where I've really just skimmed over because I've just not had the brain power to kind of get through the scene. And then editing is where I kind of make it sound nice. You know, I'll fix my sentences, I'll put in my nice fancy words, nice fancy description, and I'll kind of make it sound like an actual author wrote it, you know. So for me, editing is like, right now I can actually look at this and feel happy about it. In terms of like publishers, when they kind of tell you what to go through in your writing process, it's kind of like 3 distinct stages. You'll have your like structural edits, which are your big kind of plot changing edits. So you're kind of you're making changes to the actual storyline, you're taking out chapters, you're adding in scenes, you're taking away characters, adding in new characters. Those are your kind of big changes. So whilst I enjoy it, it can take a lot of energy. I think it's more the fact that you're deleting massive pages and pages of work sometimes, and it can feel a bit frustrating, but you're just deleting so much work. But after your structural edits and everything is kind of like confirmed, that's when you move on to your line edits, which are your, you know, you're going line by line, you're fixing kind of certain paragraphs, but you're not making massive changes. So that is my favorite stage of editing, because that's where the book really comes to life. You really expand on the characters, you expand on the description, and the book starts to actually look like a book and not just like a copy and paste of random scenes disconnected and joined together. And then after that, it'll be like your copy edits, which are like your proofreading, your spelling and grammar, and making the sentences more concise, that kind of stuff, which usually somebody else actually does that. So that's kind of good, because that sounds quite boring to me.
Oh my gosh.
So
Yes.
yeah. So for me, line edits, that is my kind of favorite part of the process. Yeah.
Okay, great. So this next question is kind of just right along that same line, from Andrew Highland in Michigan, wants to know, are there any unusual challenges you work through during the revision process?
I'd say the biggest challenge for me is that I'm like a chronic underwriter. So I never write enough. You know, a first draft for me is usually between like 40,000 and 50,000 words, which is very short for a novel. Most novels, you kind of need to be like 70,000 words and above. So for me, the hardest thing is now, once I've written that first draft, is to find a way to add in more words, add in more scenes, flesh out the story, because it's very like bare bones. So I think that's the hardest part of the process for me, is kind of now getting the story out, then going through and thinking, how can I, in some cases, double my word count without just writing random fluff? It has to actually be proper scenes, proper characters, and make the story kind of flow. So that's probably the hardest part for me.
Yeah. Okay. Our next question is from Madeline Polhouse in Mexico. And they want to know, how do you deal with being too self-critical on your work? And how do you stay inspired to keep writing despite this self-sabotage?
I mean, I wouldn't say I've succeeded in this element. There'll be good days, bad days. There'll be days where you look at your work, you're like, this is the best thing I've ever written. And then a week later, you read it and you're like, actually, this isn't very good. So I think you just have to kind of keep plodding along. Writing is not a kind of a straight A to B process. It is a journey. It's, especially when you're kind of drafting and editing, there'll be times where you think, am I making my book worse? Am I going backwards? You'll be deleting scenes and it's almost like you're not really progressing. You're kind of having to go back again. It's a lot of going back again. It's not a straight line to the finish. So I think you have to kind of just accept that you can't judge the book until it is finished. And there'll be many points where you think it's finished and it's not finished. So you have to wait until it's finished. Then you can kind of look at it and be like, okay, now I can compare it to other books. Because there's no point comparing a published book to something that's half finished. It's never going to match up. You've got to an equal comparison, I suppose.
Okay. Brandy DeRusha in Virginia wants to know, what advice would you give to a person who is struggling with finding their writing process or their voice?
I guess I would say are you enjoying it? Because that is the crucial element. You have to enjoy it, because it's such a long process. There'll be times where you're really kind of not motivated, or you're really not in the mood, and it is only your enjoyment that is going to see you through it. You have to be really passionate, not just about writing, but just about books in general. You have to really enjoy reading, and think about what it is you enjoy. Is it you like being kind of immersed in a character's thoughts? You like to kind of, read about different experiences and you kind of develop empathy? Is it that kind of escapist factor of reading about new worlds and going off on an adventure? Or you want to kind of feel connected to thoughts that aren't your own, if that makes sense? Because sometimes reading kind of puts you into that space where you're not really in your own thoughts, you're in the thoughts of somebody else. So you have to kind of find, what is it about books that you enjoy? What is it about writing? Because that's going to see you through the process. And that's where you kind of discover your voice, and you discover how you like to write and how you want to, your own unique style. For me, I love writing dialogue scenes. That's probably why I like script writing. I like, reenacting my dialogue and saying it in all like the different voices and stuff. So for me, writing lets me enter a bit of like a hyper focus. I have ADHD, so I'm always kind of jumping between things. But when I'm writing, it's like my brain is silent for like 2 hours at a time, and I can just power through and just write. So that's nice for me, is just to kind of be able to focus, I suppose, and just that is the part of the writing process that I enjoy.
Okay. Jacqueline Deshand in Indiana wants to know, what has your experience of collaborating with a publisher been?
Very I would say mixed. There's always going to be parts of the process that you enjoy more than others. Publishing is very up and down. there might be lots happening in such a short amount of time, and then there's huge stretches where not a lot is happening. I would say the process is overall positive. I felt that I had a good, team of editors. That always helps. My agent, she's always great for advocating what I need and kind of explaining things, because publishing is still a very secretive industry. A lot of authors don't really talk about their experiences. You don't really have anything to go off. So a lot of the times, especially when it's your first being published, you don't really know what's normal and what to expect. You'll have all these deadlines and you'll kind of think, right, I've really got to kind of this done. The first book, they were a bit more lenient with my deadlines, but the second book, my deadlines were pretty much like halved. Sometimes I only had 3 weeks for each editing process stage, and it felt a lot more rushed. So that was maybe part of the process I really didn't enjoy, because compared to the first book, I had months for deadlines, and then they'd just kind of been narrowed down to weeks. It was I was a bit confused. Is that normal? But again, I didn't have anyone to ask. Just kind of get along with it and just do it. But part of the process I most enjoyed is like, when they email you your cover reveal for the first time, and you get to work with artists and kind of say, oh, can we change the color of this? Can we try a different font? That's very fun. Choosing the narrators for your audiobooks, that's very fun. And doing a lot of like online events, especially when it's kind of that lead up to publication. You'll do a lot of podcasts. You'll kind of see like your proofs getting sent out on Instagram, a lot of like TikTokers doing all these like unboxing, and that's very fun. Or when, even like months after publication, seeing people write reviews, or they're taking pictures on Instagram of your books with like flowers and, glitter, and, doing all these like really nice bookstore pictures, and you're like, wow, somebody's actually taken the time to curate a really beautiful picture with my book. Like it feels a little bit unreal, like somebody's enjoyed my book enough that they want to take a nice picture of it and put it on their Instagram. So that's nice to see. I think that's part of the publishing that I most enjoy.
Okay, our next question is from Emily Rochmat from Pennsylvania, and they want to know, how did you go from drafting your book to getting published? What were the obstacles you faced?
So for me, I didn't really have your traditional approach to publication, as in I didn't draft my book, then submit it to agents and go through that kind of process. I kind of just did something a bit, I guess at the time I didn't really think much of it, is where I wrote the beginning of the Thief, I'd say like the first couple of chapters, and then I submitted it to the Kimberley Chambers Award. It's just something that had kind of popped up on social media, and it said, your first 3 chapters and a synopsis, and I just kind of thought, why not? Something to do. So I didn't really think anything of it until like a couple of months later I'd found out that I'd won. And then it was like the panic of, right, I've actually got to finish this book, because this book isn't even finished yet. So I had to kind of power write, finish the book and send it. And part of the competition was you won agent representation. So that's how I got my agent, was through that competition. So without that competition, I definitely would not be here. I don't think my book in the very raw format that I gave it to my agent was enough to traditionally sign. I think that competition really did give me that leg up. And then we just did a lot of editing, a lot of editing. I think that editing really was a massive learning curve for me. I think we spent about maybe 6 months editing just with my agent before we even approached publishers. So that was a massive learning curve for me of how to kind of improve my writing and get it submission ready. And then once it was ready, we submitted to publishers and we went from there. And then I signed with Chicken House. And then again, you do another 6 months of editing. So it's by the time it's kind of published, you've been editing for like a year or sometimes longer. It's such a long process, and your book will go through so many kind of phases in its own life that by the end, the original book and the end product are not even the same book. They have the same title, but that's about it. It's completely different.
Crazy. That's fascinating to hear about that process. See how long it takes for editing alone. Okay. Our next question, which I had this question myself actually, from Leanne Yunt in Pennsylvania. Why was the title of The Balloon Thief changed for the US market?
Yeah, this question still blows my mind too. So honestly, I don't really know. So when my UK publisher, so what they do is they buy the rights to your book. With those rights, they can then sell it to other countries. So that's how then the Balloon Thief was then published it was published in France, it was published in America. And when each new international publisher then buys the rights, they then have the rights to kind of change things. You still have some say, but surprisingly not a lot of say. So I think the reason they said was that the American fantasy market, they have certain expectations, and one of the expectations is the title structures. You know, that something of something and something, the Children of Blood and Bone, Courts of Thorns and Roses, da 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 da. They kind of said that title structure, we need that title structure, so readers are going to read your book and go, right, this is YA fantasy, because it follows the title structure of a lot of other American novels. So I was kind of like, okay, I'm not crazy about the title. It's a little generic, but if I can see it with the cover art, then maybe I'm gonna like it. So I'm quite happy with how they did the cover art. You know, they had the main character, she's surrounded by flames and she looks very cool. And I was like, okay, I can get on board with that. It's not my favorite title, but I can see the vision. So yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay. So our next question is from Sophia Edmondson in Texas and Tyler Nell in Pennsylvania. And they want to know, which book of yours did you enjoy writing the most?
I guess The Balloon Thief. I mean, I did enjoy writing Emerald Sky, which is the sequel to The Balloon Thief. But again, it was the tight deadlines for me. It was a very quick turnaround with that book. Whereas The Balloon Thief, I felt like I had years of going over and editing, and it was a bit more of a relaxed process. Whereas Emerald Sky was very much submit your draft by this day. Now you've got 3 weeks to edit, another 3 weeks to do that, and it was very fast. So I felt a little bit rushed in that sense. At the minute now, I'm working on 3 historical romances, so I'm enjoying these books a lot because I have a lot more time to kind of focus on these. So I guess I kind of like the genre shift maybe. It's still YA, but a little bit different. It's, you know, not quite the fantasy, but I'm still kind of amping up the romance. So at the minute, these probably are the 3 books I'm enjoying writing the most.
Okay, great. Our next question is from Lena Gallo in New Jersey, and they want to know, you're the winner of the Kimberley Chambers Kickstart Prize for Underrepresented Writers. What did that award mean to you, and how did it impact your creative journey?
Well, I guess, like I said before, it was integral. I think without that competition, I probably would not be writing today, or at least my journey to become a writer would be a lot longer than what it was. But I think those type of awards are, you know, they're amazing what they can do for writers who maybe aren't as represented in the industry, or they think that, you know, it just, amongst the sea of competition, how is my book ever going to be seen or heard? Those competitions are really integral to that, because whereas an agent might get hundreds of submissions a day, a lot of those might only get a glance and are kind of tossed aside. A competition kind of guarantees that the judges are going to read every single entry and give it a bit more time. And I think that's what was important, that actually my entry got more time and more attention because it was a competition and not just a general submission. So without that, yeah, I would not have signed my agent, and then I would not have been published. So that is kind of the answer to everything, really.
Yeah. Okay, our next question is from Devin Robert in New Jersey, and they want to know, what is a topic or aspect of your work you wish you could talk about more or wish more people asked about you?
I guess just writing and working in a creative industry. At times it can be quite isolating and quite lonely because you're working for yourself and you're working by yourself. You know, yes, you're working with agents, editors, proofreaders, publishers, but they all have different roles. You know, only you can do your role. So in that sense, you don't have a colleague or anyone to work with. It's just kind of you and yourself. And sometimes that can be the lonely aspect. So it helps to kind of have like writing groups and other people to kind of bounce ideas off. But I guess it's the pressure knowing that only you can deliver the book. No one else is going to help you. So that, I think, is maybe the part that people don't really think about creative industries, that a lot of time it is you working by yourself. But then it's obviously the freedom. It's the fact that I'm doing something I enjoy. It's not a corporate job. It's something I can fit around my life. And that's what works for me. That's why I do it.
Great. Okay, we are coming to our last question from Tisha Salopa in Missouri, and they want to know, do you have any upcoming plans or new paths about which you are excited? And what can we expect from you soon?
So I guess I need to finish the 3 books that I'm working on. One of them is out on submission, so I'm just kind of waiting. Submission's a very long process, but I'd say historical romance is probably the new thing I'm going to branch into. I'm also a big gaming nerd, so I really do want to kind of get more into game writing. At the minute, it's mobile app games, but I would really like to kind of move into consoles. That would be like a dream job for me. You know, writing for like Elder Scrolls or Hogwarts Legacy, or, you know, just writing all the kind of game lore and the scripts and the dialogues and all the kind of quests and stuff. So that would be something amazing if I could either kind of move into that and do that alongside novel writing, or, you know, we can hope. But that's kind of where I'm heading, I suppose.
That's awesome. That would be really cool. Okay, well, that takes us through all of the questions that we have. Thank you so, so much for taking the time to be here with us and answering all of these questions. We really appreciate it. It's been so fun hearing about your process and your work.
No, these are really, really good questions. So thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending this evening and for sending your questions to us for the interview. If you would like to watch the interview again, because it was amazing, it will be made available on our YouTube channel at Sigma Tau Delta English. If you click on the bell to subscribe, you'll receive updates, interesting video content from us in the future. This is the last webinar for this semester, but we'll be back in the new year with webinars with authors including Paulette Golden and Bradley Sides. So look out for more information about those in January. So good night and happy holidays.